Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to do a presentation. I don't by all means have all the answers. So I see this more just to kickstart a discussion because I believe the answers each one of us are seeking actually lies in the communities of which we are part. Um, so I'm just going to give a few pointers, and hopefully we'll have a question and an answer session as well. I understand that each person's personal and/or business situation will differ. So by no means am I going to give you all the answers that you need, but I think we just need to start this discussion. So I think currently where we are with this whole crisis, uh, we aim for three things. I think the first one is not getting sick, and Jasper will speak a bit on the nutrition side. Then also not going broke financially, and lastly, not being driven crazy. I think all of us have quite a increase in our levels of stress, and we've all been hooked to the news and just trying to understand what is going on. So those three things: not getting sick, not going broke, and not being driven crazy. Okay, so we know what the challenges are. I'm going to just quickly look at our personal finance during this time, business finance, and then the type of protection or help we can look for. Okay, so we all know, except for the medical emergencies being created, basically already starting in January, supply chains started to freeze up um, due to travel restrictions, but also just in general, people can't work in factories. They can't produce components that are used down the supply chain. So businesses are being affected everywhere or just coming to a standstill. And that has a effect on businesses' cash flow, their ability to pay bills, to service debts, and a strict quarantine will increase this, although for a shorter period of time. Okay, so uh, all of this quarantining that's happening is really, as you might have seen in the news, to try and flatten the curve. Many people use this argument saying, oh, but so many people die from malaria and from flu and X, Y, and Z. And so far, the coronavirus deaths hasn't been numerically that large. But that's not really the point. The point is that uh, there are elderly people at risk, that when they get this virus, their chance of survival is very low, and hospitals get overwhelmed. And so to try and uh, manage this medical emergencies, uh, the authorities need to flatten the curve, and this is the reason for these quarantines. If you look at South Africa's figures, basically every 3 days you should see a doubling of figures unless some drastic measures are put in place. So I've been keeping track of this. 19 March, 150 infections, projected for today 300. I know in the news it says 240, but by 30 days from now, 18 April, you look at 153,000 infected people. So, this can create quite an emergency. So just background why there's this whole talk of a total lockdown. I think all of you have been reading news, so I don't have to try and convince you on this. So let's have a look just at our personal finances. So like I said, I don't have all the answers, but let's just start the discussion. I think there's a need to reprioritize. And some people have been quite good, especially in what is known as the prepper community, with this. They've been preparing for a financial meltdown or problems developing. No one expected a black swan event like this with a virus that actually speeds up a financial crash. So um, I think if one looks at your personal finances, where you should be allocating funds, I think the first thing is to look after your physical well-being. So food and water. I know there's a lot of talk in the media. Don't hoard. Um, uh, there's differing opinions about this. If it gets really bad and supply chains totally freeze up, uh, one is going to start struggling to get certain supplies. At the moment, you can still visit the grocery store. You can do online grocery orders. I've never done that before personally. I actually tested it this weekend, but I'm only getting my order on Tuesday. But I can tell you what's happening in places like Switzerland, because I have family there. They have to wait 2 weeks before they get their online order with food delivered. So uh, I don't think it's a bad idea just to have some supplies, even if you just go every second day to the shop and just add a bit, add a bit. Uh, you can go and Google the type of food that's good to buy, but I'll just give you some ideas. So, things like dried fruit, dried vegetables, dried meat, pasta, rice, tin food, long life milk, and then certain vegetables like potatoes, butternuts, sweet potatoes, they tend to last very long, and certain fruits like oranges as well. You can keep them for weeks. Also, just basic medicines. It's good just to have a supply. If you have a baby, for example, in your household, suppositories for fever, simple things like jig that you might need to purify water with. I remember in 2008, I was 2 months in the country of Liberia, and all the water was polluted. So we had to put chlorine into the water every day. It tasted like swimming pool water for 2 months, but that's the only way we didn't get sick. So that's quite important. And then just basic pain medications like paracetamol. Um, I'm going to leave it to Jasper to speak on the vitamins. Some people like using colloidal silver, but you can go and Google those type of lists of things that are good to have on hand. And then also, I think having some cash, physical cash on hand is important, because those of you that have been following financial markets, it's total chaos. And if it gets really bad, in the sense that bank run starts to happen, governments can shut down banks. Um, and so then it's just good to have some physical cash on hand. So this is not to try and instill fear. There's many people, myself included, that uh, this is not a okay. It's a shocking situation, but these things I'm listing here, I've been doing for more than a year already. So uh, there's a number of people that do this. Even in Switzerland, where I'm familiar with the situation, people have been doing this since the Second World War, even till today. So they don't have to rush to get cash or some food, or they basically prepared for situations like this. Okay, so just in terms of allocating your funds, I would list these as quite important. Um, in terms of paying bills, uh, we don't yet have all the details. Tonight or maybe tomorrow, our government will release some details on an economic response package. I don't know exactly what it will entail. So, you're going to have to reprioritize your finances based on the information that's available. But at this stage, I think food definitely, uh, rental, paying of your home loan, that can change. I actually saw a SMS of one of the big banks today that someone forwarded me, where this bank was saying that, uh, and I don't know if it was just on a specific loan product, but that they will give a 3-month payment holiday. So these type of things will, or solutions will come forth. So maybe spare some of your cash. Don't hastily pay stuff. Let's first see what credit providers come up with, what solutions. The same with government. Um, water, electricity. That's important. And then, uh, you know, for medical needs. That's how I would prioritize it. In terms of paying debt, um, okay, I think at this stage, unsecured debts are the least of your worries. So these would be personal loans, credit cards. Uh, these can quite easily be restructured. Um, selling of assets is an idea, but at this stage, if you do that, it will probably be what is known as a fire sale, where you sell something below its market value. But it might be a solution for you. So if you've got 2 or 3 vehicles in your extended family, maybe you can get by with one, and you sell one. If the vehicle you sell is under hire purchase, immediately it will help you with your cash outflow. If it's paid off and it has some value, immediately you'll have an inflow of cash. In terms of fixed property, uh, this is more longer term solution. So one can have this discussion later on. This is not really applicable at this moment, but if you have some equity in property, yeah, you might be able to sell it. Once again, it will probably be below market value, but I expect rentals will fall quite considerably. So just keep this in the back of your mind. In terms of investments, those of you that uh, are invested on the stock markets, or even just simple instruments like money markets, I just want to say it's not too late to hedge. It's not too late to protect your investments. Uh, and the way you protect it is by moving money into things with intrinsic value. So top on that list for me would be gold and silver. Now, some people might say, lately the gold and especially silver price has fallen considerably, but one just needs to understand the dynamics. A lot of people in the stock markets with margin calls have had to sell gold and silver in huge quantities to raise cash. But this is an ideal way to hedge risk of financial loss. So this is now in dollar terms that the gold and silver price has fallen, but in rand terms it hasn't. So people that already have gold or silver are already in a much better position. I must, however, say there's quite a shortage out there of gold and silver. Many of the smaller dealers, all their stock is sold out. Some of the bigger dealers do have stock. You could also consider gold and silver ETFs. Not ideal, but if you can't get hold of the physical stuff, that is an option. And then even if you need to move money just into other intrinsic assets, uh, I think stuff like cattle and agriculture is actually quite positive. So there's a business, Livestock Wealth, where you can buy cattle. The Fed Group, which is quite a well-known company, they sell agricultural type of products. And even on the stock markets, there are certain companies like ShopRite Pick and Pay that will be doing very well. Yeah. So investments, it's not too late to hedge. Yeah, and then also if you do have like fixed property, that's great, especially if it's paid off, then that's really great, because even if currencies crash, it will just revalue back at least to its replacement cost over the medium term. Then point five, it's important to look at reducing expenses. So I want to encourage you to review your budget. Look at what expenses can you cut? Where can you downscale? Where can you share services? Like, for example, my mom is staying with us. So, since 2 days ago, so I've just put a hold on her car insurance. The car's in the garage. It's not being used. Cancelling her internet. There's a few things that we can cancel, duplicate expenses. So it's important to look at where can you reduce expenses, and it will often be on insurance policies. Okay. Then point six, I think if you haven't recently reviewed your testament, so I don't want to scare anyone and say, graduation day is coming close by, but it could happen, so just have your last will and testament up to date. And if you don't have one, it's very simple. You can write down the following points. You can take a piece of paper, even toilet paper, and write a last will and testament. It just needs to be dated. There needs to be 2 witnesses who are not beneficiaries that are older than 14 years that need to witness with you, and obviously you need to sign it. So that's just a really important document to have in place. And then lastly, something I want to mention is I've already seen an email from a gig member that said, sorry, please cancel my debit orders. I lost my job. I'm unemployed. And this is going to happen in our community, that people become unemployed. And I want to tell you, there's something powerful when a person starts to volunteer. And I know our situations differ, but if it ever comes to the point where uh, you're unemployed, and let's say you're single, you don't have a family with small children, go and volunteer at a hospital or wherever help is needed. You never know, volunteering can open job opportunities or business opportunities for you that you might never thought were possible. So keep this in the back of your mind. Okay. I know I'm painting a grim picture, but I think we should just prepare for the worst, and usually the worst doesn't happen, but it's good just to be prepared. Okay, in terms of business, those of you that are self-employed, there might be a need for you to reinvent what you are actually doing. I was thinking, Jasper, you and myself, we are basically in the accommodation business, and I've even played around with the idea to say, well, look, if I can't fill my rooms, I would go to whichever relevant authorities are there and say, well, if you need space, use my property for patients, but please just get an agreement with the city council on the rates and taxes and the water and the electricity, because those are big overheads for my business. And the same for you, Jasper. I think there's ways that one can reinvent your business, or look out for opportunities. So everything isn't doom and gloom. If you stay with your current business, I think it's important to communicate with your customers. I'm making use of a cleaning service in my business, and I was quite prepared for the business owner to say, look, my staff is not coming because it's a health risk. But unfortunately, I had to phone uh, the person, and she said, no, we're going on, and she explained their protocols. But I think it's just important to be proactive and communicate with your customers. Don't go quiet on them. Then they also know what you are able to offer, what you're able to do, and what you are not able to do. So I think that's important. In terms of expenses, uh, I think it's good to start looking at your structure of your expenses. Try and renegotiate fixed costs like rentals. Don't just accept it for what it is. Everyone is gonna have financial problems and suffer financially. So so at least try and renegotiate your fixed costs, and try rather to have a variable uh, cost structure in your business. Simple things like, for example, cell phone contracts. My cell phone contract uh, expired a month or so ago, and I just decided I'm just going to let it go on a month-to-month basis. If I need to cancel it and go to prepaid, then yeah, I'm free to do it. I'm not locked into a contract. So try not to create new fixed costs. Rather try to reduce them and work on a variable cost structure as far as it is possible in your situation. Also with debt, communicate with creditors. Um, I think just about all debt will need to be eventually restructured. And like I said earlier, we don't yet know, um, you know, with what plans government will come forth, and the banks will come forth. But uh, always important to communicate with your creditors and stick to your arrangements. If a creditor says, I won't accept anything less than 5,000 Rand a month repayment, and you say, but I can only pay a 750 Rand. And they say, well, we don't accept it. I worked as a credit analyst. When that 750 comes in, I've noted my previous discussion, and I say, well, okay, he's not paying nearly what I want, but at least he's keeping his word. So your word is very important when it comes to communicating with your creditors. So don't overcommit. Whenever you give your word, then stick to it. Insurance, yeah, reviewing business interruption insurance. I did this presentation a bit earlier this week, but I see a lot of insurers have already excluded the coronavirus. So I'm not going to speak much more about that. And then I think very important is to maintain community, that we don't isolate ourselves, and we're part of usually not just one community, but multiple communities. And I believe the answers lie within the community amongst many individuals, not just a few people. And then for me personally, I think the most important point is to exercise faith. And I know we might be from different faith persuasions, but personally, this is quite important to me, that one can only look so much to man, to a person to help. There comes a point where one needs to look to heaven, and God, our Creator, needs to help a person. And so, for those of you that have had faith experiences like that, um, remind yourself of tough times where things looked like a disaster, but it actually worked out very well at the end of the day. So personally, to me, this is really, really important. I'm just going to end off saying, have a plan. So plan for worst case scenario, do what you can, leave the rest to God. And also think about others in your personal situation, but also business situation. There's such a temptation to become self-focused in all our decisions, but let's consider others. There's possibilities to hedge. Gold and silver works well, and then your relationship networks are really important. Also, try and maintain a level of peace in your heart. If we are overly anxious, we tend to make decisions that are not of a very high quality. But if one has a level of peace in your heart, you can start to become creative, and then also just maintain a routine. Maybe limit your reading of the news to 3 times a day or times a day. Get enough sleep, get in some physical activity. I think it's just important to have some sense of stability, and keeping a routine is a good way to do it. Okay, good. Thank you, Jasper.